Hello and welcome to Nerd Punches Nerd, the only podcast where a bunch of nerds pretend to physically fight over minor pop culture minutia. I'm Jeremy, here with Benji and Sam. Hey guys.
What's up?
Go Caps! I'm hijacking this. Go Caps! Woo! Yeah!
Hey, come on, that's my line.
Oh, that's
Were
that's
you
beautiful.
actually gonna say that?
I wasn't going to, but yeah,
It's your
let's go
line.
Caps.
Yeah! Woohoo! Yeah!
All right.
This is pretty historic. I know. Like you hate hockey specifically, Jeremy, and you're like, I want hockey to die, and I think pucks are stupid, and I think that Puck the character from Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream is also stupid, and I hate hockey. But here's the thing: in my world of only hearing about Caps results and sort of following it, and Sam actually following it, it's very exciting.
Right. Well, the only Cap I support is Captain America, and the only Captain America support is from the movies.
Not Marvel?
And not from the comic books.
Not Captain Marvel or Captain Doctor Strange.
Oh, yeah, that guy's good. All right, So today we're going to be discussing Avengers Infinity War, and since it's been already a week since it's come out, I feel like we're capable of doing some classic spoiler alert. Right, guys? So spoilers.
Are you going to do spoiler alert, Jeremy?
Yeah. Spoiler alert. So,
Thank you.
That's their spoiler alert. Now, what we're going to do is just go around the room and get things started by basically discussing, like, if we could pick one of the many Marvel characters that wasn't in Infinity War, which leaves us with at least a few, and we had to see them vanished by Thanos, who would it be? So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the biggest Caps fan and then go to the least Caps fan.
All right, that's a good way of doing things.
Yeah, and I think we all know who's actually posted about the Caps on Facebook the most. So Sam,
I liked several posts. Yeah, and I do like it. I'm very happy about this.
Yeah, but you didn't start those posts. So Sam, why don't you go first?
All right, I will go first as the biggest Caps fan on this podcast. The Marvel character that I would definitely want to disappear, and I'm just going to preface this by saying I'm totally stealing this joke from The Onion, but Iron Fist. There was a funny Onion headline that said something like, Netflix relieved to learn that Iron Fist, one of the characters that has been killed by Thanos.
That's so mean.
It's so mean, and yet it's so true.
That's funny. Okay, I like that. All right, Benj.
Definitely, what's his name? Fozzie Wazzy. Who's the guy?
I don't know.
Foggy.
Foggy?
The guy.
Foggy Nelson?
The guy who I did Daredevil, right?
All right.
That would definitely be it.
See,
I definitely would be very, very happy to see that sort of. It's kind of like the Kefka peel away. You know how like Kefka dies in FF6. That's kind of how people were in the movie, and I would be overjoyed to see that happen to Foggy Woggy or whatever his name. as he's trying to do a clever speech, and it happens just in the middle of that. That would make me very happy.
Wow.
Just for the record, I like Foggy.
Yeah, well,
I'm sure you do. So I hope it happens. Like we're both watching it, and as it happens, I start cheering, and you're like, no! And
Foggy Woggy! Yeah.
Jeremy's just shaking his head.
Well, I'd be sorry to see him go. See, I was originally thinking for mine the version of Deadpool from X-Men Origins Wolverine. Because but it's just too easy. So
not only is it too easy, but I almost feel like that character has in some ways been redeemed by the fact that like now in the new Deadpool movie, like Ryan Reynolds gets to make fun of that.
Yeah, I think that's true. So I think the person I would get rid of is whatever the name of that Glenn Close character is in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh.
Which I believe her name is...
Glenn Closer?
No. I believe her name is Glenn Close. It's a clever Marvel reversal of names. Mainly because she had like the least well done line in that entire movie. So,
What was her line?
it
Which
was
line was that, Jeremy?
it was the thing about talking to Quill at the end. He's like, well, we did an analysis of your DNA, and it seems like it's like, oh Jesus, all right. And I remember hearing that like James Gunn was saying like, yeah, we added this in because there were audiences who were confused about that. I was like, okay, all right, fine. All right, so let's uh let's get started in talking about the movie Avengers. Now, I think we all agree that it's a very good movie. You know,
Mhm.
Maybe even great.
And
But
Jimmy, one thing I realized too is this is almost it's sort of the anniversary, sort of I don't know how many year anniversary of us starting the podcast. If you think about it, because remember we did like the proto podcast
it's
on
5 years. 5 years.
yeah, we did it for the first Avengers. Like you, I don't we never put it online, right?
Hmm.
No, we didn't because Sam was the when we got our first special guest.
Yes.
We that christened the dawn of Nerd Punches Nerd.
Right.
So it's it's
Yes.
our
Well,
celebration.
it's not an official Nerd Punches Nerd unless you have guest starring Sam.
Exactly. Jeremy and I have our side. It just feels sort of empty.
Right. Well, I think it's important to start things off by giving you guys the most important piece of information about Avengers, which is the Yehuda review.
Oh my god, I love the Yehuda review.
Now,
This is great.
as you
You
guys
should get a
know,
recording of him doing it. Like,
well, we spoke for like an hour, so I didn't really. It was a little too
Oh,
long.
here's
That's like a
highlights.
podcast right there. You should do a podcast with Yehuda.
As you guys know, of course, Yehuda is basically like the biggest comic book nerd I know. And to the point where he has like a real sliding scale about comic book movies. Just to like give you the point of example, like he'll laugh with glee, in his seat as he's watching it in a crowded theater. It's great. Uh, like just to like put it in comparison. He's like Thor he thought was great. You know, you know, sure. Does he say Winter Soldier? He thinks is or Black Panther. He thinks are like the best. Yeah, but it's like even Suicide Squad. He said was okay. So, I'm just saying, that's your sliding scale right there. So of course, as you would probably,
Has there ever been a comic book movie that he like straight up said was bad?
uh, didn't he? I think he said Electro was bad.
Elektra. Okay, that's a good one.
Yeah,
I don't
well,
think I've seen that one.
no, actually, I haven't either.
Nor have anyone.
Oh, yeah, there you
Or
go.
has anyone.
Yeah. So he said, as you would have expected, he thought it was really great, an amazing movie, one of Marvel's best. He says he thinks it's the best team up movie he's ever seen.
Which one?
The best team up movie he's ever seen.
Oh, this one.
Yeah.
You're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he basically, like he essentially agreed with everything I said for the most part, but it was just kind of interesting, to hear his like feedback because he's very familiar with Thanos from the comics and he knows all that backstory and he's read all those Infinity War stories and stuff. So
Really?
so he knows like the whole shebang, whereas I just like I know a bunch of it, but I haven't read it. So
Right.
It's sort of like a different level.
And when did what decade did like the Infinity Wars, the first one, start?
What you're
When
talking
was
about
this?
in the comics?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Let's see. It looks like it was in the early 90s.
Oh, really? It's that
Yeah.
recent.
Well, relatively speaking, yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's a good idea to just sort of talk about a few things. The first thing I want to say is I feel like one of the strengths of the movie is that you didn't have to rely on a lot of exposition. Like, these are all characters we know. I don't know how. I mean, did you guys see it in like crowded theaters or like how big were the audiences?
Mine was fairly packed. I saw it at a theater in LA, and it was like the Thursday night. Like I got it at one of the earlier showings, so it was pretty packed.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it actually on a Sunday afternoon matinee, but the theater was still, I would say, mostly full.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw it in
Not surprised.
like early afternoon, and it was also it became full. So let me. I want to ask, like, and I'll answer this first. Is like, what were the like big applause lines? You know, when is it that like when are the biggest reactions? Because I can tell you, for me, the first huge reaction was when you saw Captain America for the first time. You know,
Yeah,
he like
same.
steps out of the
Yeah.
shadows, he grabs the spear, and I was listening to someone. One of the things I really like about that whole scene is like, you know, it is unquestionable that Vision and Scarlet Witch are the most like powerful members of the Avengers, but like they're like relieved. The Captain's like, oh, finally we're saved. You know, and it makes sense, of course, because like neither one of them is like particularly like inspiring as a leader, but it's like that's why it's kind of interesting. It's like, oh, he, you know, finally, even though this guy who is, you know, by any stretch, you know, like normal measurement weaker, you know, has that. And the thing is, like, that's in a way it's like a weakness of the movie, but also not, in that you don't really have much of an arc for Captain America,
Right.
you know. And I think that's one of the things that's kind of funny to think about, because I think it's fair both to think about the movie with and without like a context of sorts. It's fair to think of it in the context of what we've seen already, and also what's to come, like the knowledge of what's to
Mm-hmm.
come. Like, you know, how does the knowledge that, listen, you know that as soon as Ryan Coogler's ready, they'll make a Black Panther 2. You know,
Right.
you know that there's going to be more like Guardians or Spider-Man movies.
Right.
You know, like how does that affect your enjoyment of this movie or your feeling of the impact of the ending?
So we're sort of saying our
Oh,
reactions to it.
you want to jump right to talking about the ending?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was gonna
I think
hold
it's
off
fair.
because I thought maybe we would talk about, you know, what did we like, what did we not like, you know.
No, this makes it spicy, Sam.
Yeah, well, why
Hot
bury,
discussion.
why bury the
Trade
lead?
in blows, if you will.
Yeah, so what do you think?
Okay. It's funny. I don't know that I really noticed any like big like applause lines or like moments when like the audience like really reacted to like, you know, a character introduction or something. Um, I will say definitely when we saw like Black Panther and Wakanda, there was cheering in the theater.
Right.
That for sure there was an audience reaction to that. The first time we saw the Wakandans. Other than that, yeah, I don't think I really noticed any moment when everybody was like, "Oh my God, it's this character," and like started cheering. Certainly that moment in the climax when
Thor.
like Thor shows up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that was like a moment, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, like it's happening! Thor's back, and he's just kicking everyone's ass." Like, you know, that was a moment that definitely had an audience reaction. I don't know. What about you, Benj? What did you notice?
Well, definitely that Captain America moment. It was a lot of, and I felt like because I got it, because I watched it like one of the earlier showings, I felt like you had a lot of like more hardcore fans. So there were definitely a lot of people there who were, I think even some people were dressed up.
That's cool.
I didn't see a lot. I didn't see a lot, but I think I saw one or two people dressed up. But there definitely was like people cheering when they saw like almost every single next character that showed up. Probably
Right.
not. I don't. I don't. I don't know about Scarlet Witch or Vision.
Yeah, I feel like you
Maybe
get
maybe.
that's
Well,
like
it's also
hardcore
like I mean, you could cheer
fans.
for Paul Bellamy, but
Paul
yeah.
Bettany. On about your Paul Bellamy.
um, I think maybe people cheered when he turned into Vision. Um, definitely that Thor part, but as I said, I think it was like really the theater was like packed with fans.
Yeah.
So I think there were. What was I going to say? I think. So I think there was a lot of cheering, you know, going on with pretty much any new character came up. I mean, I think even Spider-Man. I mean, even the Spider-Man.
The Spider-Man, yes.
I mean, it was cool there was Spider-Man in space as a side point, but and then yeah, definitely the reaction with Thor. But I think people even cheered when they saw Peter Dinklage. I mean, I mean, and in fact, I was very happy to see that too.
Yeah,
I
got that
I shouldn't
one.
say even. I shouldn't say even. Yeah, I mean, obviously
Well,
Peter
yeah.
Dinklage is awesome,
We
but
had, I mean, sure, we had a lot of applause lines too. Just like when you first saw, like the rubber man playing, and then it says space,
yeah,
which
yeah,
people laughed and applauded.
yeah, exactly, yeah, that too. So there was that, and then are we supposed to talk about what we thought about the endings?
Yeah, so I'm just saying, like thinking about,
Okay.
like we're talking about the impact here. Like we all know that some of it can't be like 100%
Of
done.
course,
How is it
of
going to be
course.
done? That's who knows. Maybe it won't be resolved exactly the way we suspect. Where we'll just be like, oh, Thanos is, oh, and Thanos is like, oops, I forgot I left a safety on.
Yeah, well, I will also say I am purposely not trying to look at what they did in the comics. I mean, if I find out, like I'll find out, but like, because apparently the spoiler alert for the comics, apparently that snapping thing that he does actually does happen in the comics.
Yes, that's correct.
But I thought they did. I was a fan of it. I thought it was great, and it really made me feel for a second like oh wow, like and it's just like feel like it's kind of the same thing of like if you're moved by a movie about, let's say, a historical character who gets killed, like you still like if it's really engaging, you're still going to sort of feel like, oh no, don't get killed, something like that.
Yeah.
Or whatever happens. I mean, if it's like a World War II movie, like you know what happens at the end of World War II,
Yeah.
but like but you still. So anyway, I was still caught up. I was caught up in it. I thought it was really great. I thought like it's also kind of a clever way to really. I mean, it's very like. It's very risky to do, I feel like, but I like that they did that.
Yeah, it's definitely a ballsy decision,
Yeah,
and for
I
sure.
definitely, yeah, I thought it was ballsy, and it's a good way to get people hooked into like the whole series, especially now that they have to compete with streaming. They have to compete with TV and all sorts of other things. This is a way. I mean, they're already going to do well, but this is a way, I think, really to rope people more in. I mean, I don't know if it's going to work or if it has worked, but I think it was a smart move in a lot of ways, and it also like made me realize, and this is something, Jeremy, I was saying to you before, but I like it was the, quote unquote my theory that I came up with, but I was fairly certain that other people figured it out, and it's not so much of a secret, which is that Sam, who do you think the protagonist of Infinity War is?
So I've already seen some discussion. I assume where you're going with this is the idea that Thanos is actually the
Yeah,
protagonist of the movie.
yeah,
I've seen some discussion of that already, and I do find it intriguing. I mean, he certainly is the character who is like trying the hardest to accomplish a goal and then like pursues his goal and suffers for it and sacrifices and then like reaches his goal. Like none of the other characters really do that to the same
right.
degree. And most of the other characters don't really go through the kind of emotional journey that Thanos does. So I think that's actually a pretty compelling perspective. I do want to talk about the ending though.
Go ahead.
Right. Okay. So
yeah.
to
Go ahead.
cap it off, I thought it was good, and I thought it was effective, and I thought they did a good job. I thought also that effect, like I said, the Kefka peel away, like the sort of Kefka peel away. I thought that was a cool way of doing it, of like, because that would probably be pretty hard to like film. I mean, they probably had to really think about how are they really gonna show, what does that mean if like half of living existence or half of living creatures in the universe all of a sudden die. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And there are many, many ways, and I thought that was good, especially the way it was quiet. It was like more haunting.
They got
You know,
more
so.
disturbing with that imagery in the comics. I feel like that's fine because, like, if, for example, there was like I believe in the comics version, Spider-Man is one of the ones who doesn't disappear, but like he watches like in New York how it's affecting people, like a woman like suddenly her baby vanishes, You know,
Oh wow.
I'm just saying. But that's the thing. That's like it's like the kind of thing probably best they didn't put that in the movie. It's like you can kind of like that's what's happening.
It's like
But
the opposite of it's like the inverse of what they do with Game of Thrones. In Game of Thrones, they
show you
they jack it up. They
Right.
jack up the violence.
yeah.
Right.
Not only they basically they have people explode instead of like vanishing.
So it's interesting that Benji, that you were mentioning the Kefka, fadeaway, because speaking of Kefka, Final Fantasy VI is another property that's really kind of structured in a way where you have a lot of characters. No real single hero is the protagonist, and it's a lot of characters in a lot of places with a lot of different plots, and they're all sort of tied together by the villain. Which really is kind of how this movie is constructed. I think it's really an interesting parallel. But let me talk for a minute about the ending. I want to say first of all that I did like this movie overall. I definitely enjoyed it. I thought it was well done, but I did not like the ending. I mean, there were many character deaths all throughout the movie that I had different reactions to. Like when Loki died, at first I was like, oh come on, Loki's not really dead. Like of course he's just like faking it or something. And then like over the course of the movie, I sort of gradually like thought about it more, and I was like, you know what, I think Loki really is dead. And that was kind of sad because of course I love his character. And then you have Gamora who gets killed, and like I was like, I don't know, maybe she'll come back to life, probably, but she might not, but who knows. But then like when you have the ending where Thanos just like makes half the characters disappear, for a second I was like, oh my god, like they're all dying, and then like immediately I felt this like pushback, and like, no, they're not dead, of course they're coming back, like this is ridiculous, it's fake, it doesn't mean anything, like I'm watching these characters die and I know they're going to come back to life. And so I was just like taken completely out of it because I felt like there was like no real emotional impact, to watching a bunch of character deaths that are temporary. And yet, it's being treated as if they're permanent. So I kind of had like a cold feeling about that. I thought it was ballsy to end the movie like that, but I just felt like I walked out of there like wondering like, was there some other way they could have done this where like all those deaths felt like they actually like meant something instead of just being like like a big fake out.
Yeah, well, you bring up a solid point, which is one thing I thought about was like they were clearly. Let me think how to describe this. They were clearly playing with audience expectations. Now, the thing is, it's like I give, and maybe this is true for all three of us, I give like a little more leeway and laxness, you could say, for any of these movies, like especially sort of like fantasy comic book movies, for when they used to be considered like more silly or come from a less taken seriously place. And I try to encourage and applaud along when they get more serious, or at least more like at least when they make the drama more impactful and try to do it. I mean, obviously it can be hokey, and obviously it doesn't need to be, and I also don't think they should get rid of the humor. But it's like for instance, like I don't know if I would like really enjoy The Force Awakens that much if I wasn't just like, man, I really just want to see them do a sci-fi fantasy movie that's like has some seriousness to it. Now, actually, I guess Rogue One is a better example, and I thought that was legitimately a great movie. But do you see what I'm saying? Like I give like a little more leeway, and I think it's difficult to do in these comic book movies. Some people have done it effectively, and of course, Dark Knight was one of the best examples of them doing that, and some of the other great ones. But I think it's like kind of. Okay. Oh, yeah. So my point is not just the dark stuff, but like playing with audience expectations. I mean, so they probably can't really do. Though I haven't seen Legion, so apparently Legion's more like mind bending and stuff. But But like it's harder, I think, to do experimentation stuff with audience expectations and playing with the genre in terms of like expectations, flipping it on its head, especially still at this stage. So like I give more leeway and I give them more grace. Like I'm more of a Yehuda fan of like the experimentation or the playing with the genre stuff for things like the MCU and and other sort of fantasy properties. Does that make sense?
I think
No.
so.
What I'm saying is they were doing like a playing with audience expectation thing, like a sort of avant-garde-ish sort of thing. I think saying Thanos will return and with how they played with the expectation of maybe perhaps Thanos is the protagonist. Now it wasn't the most clever turn on its head ever in cinema, but since they're able to do it even to some degree in a Marvel Expanded Universe movie, I like applaud it more than I would if I were just watching a movie that was like a supposed to be a mind-bending thing. Like if I saw an episode of like Black Mirror, which I've never seen, or Twilight Zone or something like that, I wouldn't be that impressed with that. I'd be like, oh yeah, that's like a junior level of playing with audience expectations. But since they were able to do it in one of these types of movies, I like applaud it more and think it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Well, I think for me, part of it was like, well, come on, I know that it's not, this is like, I know that this is like not going to affect me the same way it will affect other people in general. I heard stories about like kids and stuff like crying at the movie and stuff like that because they don't really have the same context of like, oh, the future,
Right.
And even with knowing things, there were still two things that were impactful because of how they were executed. One of those was Spider-Man disappearing, like because they kind of give it a moment to breathe, where you like wait, because you already know what happened with other people, and he says like I don't want to go, and which actually apparently he improvised that line.
Right.
And there's a piece of that which is sort of like you're able to see the interplay between them, and like how Tony is sort of like seeing like, oh, I see exactly how it got to the point where he is dead because of me. And I think also the Groot disappearing was also sad. And Sam, I don't know. Did you hear about what James Gunn said is the translation when teenage Groot disappears?
No, I did not know that.
So he was asked on Twitter, like, well, what is he saying? Because as you probably remember, when they write the script for Guardians of stuff, every time they write "I am Groot," he writes what the translation is, so that it can be acted appropriately. Because also
because probably the best line in the movie was when he's playing the video game. He goes, "I am Groot."
Well, I do want to get into like what we think are the best lines and stuff.
Oh my
too,
god!
But
that was a great line.
The thing, so apparently what he says then is "Dad."
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was great because it was like Jesus. That's depressing, and like, just like looking at all the.
Wait, did you say James Gunn?
Yeah.
He wrote this? I thought it was Russo brothers who wrote this.
He worked on the Guardian stuff.
Okay, cool.
He contributed to help
Good.
out. He also, like for example, one of the things that he did was change. Like Chris Pratt was originally not going to be able to shoot Gamora, but he changed that to say that he would try, even though he would fail. That he was that he would actually try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For example, that's just that's one example. So
that was kind of fun. Can we talk for a moment about the interaction between Thanos and Peter Quill as like sort of playing with the idea of like the dad interacting with the boyfriend, because there was clearly like a subtext there.
There was a subtext,
right?
Especially because he like basically because he tries to shoot Gamora and it's like he doesn't make it. It turns into bubbles. It's like, okay, I get it. But also he's like, when he takes her away, he's like, I like you.
Yeah. When he said that, I was like, that's like a dad to boyfriend.
Yeah, I hadn't
kind
even
of
thought about it until you started talking about it. But you're totally right. That is like a whole thing.
that was definitely how that scene was functioning on some level, which I thought was amazing. Like, because Thanos is like this like galaxy destroying villain, but like on another level, he's also like a dad.
He's also Gamora's dad.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, right, and I mean, one of the things I thought, and not every interaction worked well, but basically for me, everything the Guardians did with everybody was successful.
Yeah,
I
I agree.
mean, when I start just looking at the hilarious interactions between the Iron Man, Strange, Spider-Man stuff. My favorite line is I'll do you one better. Why is Gamora?
Yeah.
I mean, that got the biggest laugh in my theater, and also from me. I mean, I was just, it's like,
Yeah.
to the point where
Batista's great.
I didn't hear the next line. I mean, there's so many great things. He's like, we are here, to kick names and take ass, and Drax standing next, nodding proudly. And then, the look, and then also it was great, the reaction Robert Downey Jr. just doing, oh, we're all gonna die.
Yeah.
After that,
Yeah, that was something that was really amazing to me in this movie, is that not only that they had all these different characters and that they had, all the characters felt true to themselves, but also all of the characters sort of brought their own tone with them from their franchises, especially the Guardians. The Guardians come along and you're all of a sudden you're like, oh, now I'm watching a Guardians movie. It really felt like Guardians. And Spider-Man did that, and Iron Man does that. They all sort of and Thor even, they each sort of have their own, and it's difficult for a movie to have all these different tones all kind of together.
Especially tones, not just different stories, but different tones.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Different tones all sort of coming together and melding and working all in a single, storyline. I think that was probably one of the greatest achievements of the movie, is bringing all these characters and preserving their tones while bringing them together.
Yeah, and I mean, I noticed this. I actually wasn't the biggest fan of Civil War. I didn't dislike it. There are things that I think probably we talked about it when we had the podcast about it.
Certainly.
But one thing I was really impressed with Civil War, and I just sort of remembered again after Infinity War, is the Russo brothers are really good at. I feel like they're just really, really good at editing. I just mean in a general sense. They're really good at cutting where they need to cut to keep it going. Because it's difficult. Because kind of inherently, it's not gonna. I think it's so hard to make it work. I mean, one of the only other people who's done it was Joss Whedon. That was the first one, and it had kind of a singular tone. I mean, obviously, he Avengers was awesome, and he's written some amazing stuff, as we know. But I felt like the Russo brothers, I don't know how many other people, I actually literally don't know, would be able to cut that, to pull that off. Would be able to not only keep all these different storylines going on, but also preserve the tone. I mean, you're totally right.
I think
also,
part of
Sam,
that...
I was thinking of is that part of it. I want to hear you say in a second, Jeremy. But also, Sam, speaking of your Final Fantasy VI thing, I was thinking the way they organize the movies, they put them into little bands and little clusters, just like Final Fantasy VI.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, where you have 3 separate parties and they all take their different routes.
This might be the best adaptation of Final Fantasy VI we'll ever see. But I was gonna say, commenting about the Russo brothers, I think part of that, and they've even said this, is the fact that they are brothers. There are 2 of them, and they know each other. I just think, but that's a big thing. Joss Whedon was one guy,
right?
And
right.
I think the fact that it's the 2 of them and they have a really good collaborative working environment with James Gunn and everyone like that to be able to build this universe. I mean, to me, talking about these relationships, I think the best, the most perfect example is everything with Rocket and Thor, because it starts from a point where it's just kind of funny, but he's you Rabbit, you have the right idea. You must be the captain. Yes, that's right. And then it's great because it's showing Thor is different from a lot of these other guys in that his ego, he's learned to deal with it. It doesn't matter that Rocket is this little thing. He respects him for what he is, what he can bring to the table, and it's immediate. He has like no hangups about doing that.
And Rocket really is, I think, in some ways like the most emotionally affecting character, the most poignant character, like in the MCU. I mean, like in the first Guardians movie, his interactions with Peter Quill. In the second Guardians movie, his interactions with Yondu. And then in this movie with Thor, like, and you see him kind of in like different roles and like doing different things, but like he has a character that has like really a lot of pathos to him, and he has these really good, like things, coming together with like another character and sort of bonding in different ways. It's really emotional.
Yeah, and I think it's a good like continuation because like you have the, Thor has like that great moment too where he's like, I have nothing left to lose, and it's actually a great moment even of just acting from him. And Rocket then saying like, I have everything left to lose, and he loses almost everything at the end, but like he basically hasn't lost Thor, and that's it.
And it was just a nice like moment of like the world's going to hell, and or the universe is, and they're just like and like they're kind of sitting on the edge of the apocalypse, and they're like sharing that moment. Like it was really great. And also, Jeremy, we've talked about this, but I think they've like kind of surprisingly, but in a good way, have really developed Thor's character. I mean, like in a good way. Like he's a real character, and he's a difficult
that really helped that. Because he had little bits and things, but let's be honest here. Age of Ultron had nothing. There was no Thor characterization at all, really, in that. And there was barely any in the first Avengers. So the two Thor movies have had arcs before this new one, but this like the latest one really gave him something to do. And I have a lot of issues with Thor Ragnarok, as like I find that it doesn't like stick the landing on a lot of stuff. But one of the things I think it does succeed in is that characterization of like taking what we already know and making it something better than it was, something and something that feels like now it's like almost like the character will just write itself. It seems like you can just like he's already so well realized that it's just like boom. And I do think like what you're saying, Sim, makes perfect sense because if you think about it, basically everyone who was
sorry. Go ahead.
I'm saying everyone who was part of the original Avengers team at that point of the movie, which includes War Machine because he was there, are the only ones who have survived, plus Rocket, and that's it. If that's it's so because Falcon came after the Avengers, so he's gone. All the Guardians except Rocket are gone. Basically, Spider-Man's gone, etc. So you only see.
Wait, did Doctor Strange go too?
Yes. In fact, that was like a very explicit part.
Yes,
like,
I remember specifically Doctor Strange going.
Well, I mean, that's one of those like things. Like he says, like we're in the end game now, Stark. This is the only way, and then it's like, oh, okay, I get it. Right, okay. Whatever it is that he's seeing is obviously the way to like save things.
Well, I would to speak to that. Like one thing, if you're talking about like impressions of the ending, one thing I did feel sort of bad about was I was like, man, like. Wakanda had its moment about 2 months ago or something like that. And it's been this huge cultural phenomenon, and none of this really takes away from it. But I was thinking for a second, like, oh man, like, like Thanos has to come and ruin it all, ruin social progress.
Yeah, although we didn't see that many Wakandans disappearing, we just saw like one.
The most important one,
right,
but also it was also happening in Wakanda. I mean, and hopefully they'll continue on with that.
Yeah.
Actually, maybe that's what they'll do. Maybe like the whole revolution or whatever or sort of thing they do, or the attack on Thanos will be started, in Wakanda.
Well, I think there's no question that the success of Black Panther kind of caught everyone by surprise, including Marvel. But I think there's also no question that Marvel is going to react to that and make sure that Wakanda has a big role
they should.
The second Infinity War movie, where they're like, oh, you know what? People love Wakanda. Let's make sure they get some Wakanda in the second movie. like more
Well,
Wakanda.
Yeah,
than we
and
got
hopefully
the
they'll
first
bring in, maybe like they did with James Gunn with Guardians of the Galaxy, maybe they'll bring in Ryan Coogler for stuff with Wakanda if they didn't already. Just because also Ryan Coogler is just like I think that it was just like, and we'll talk about Black Panther in another podcast, but it was so beautifully shot and choreographed. This was fine with that, but you didn't get into like, you know, really getting deep into like Wakanda, which obviously that's what Black Panther was about. But that was one of my favorite parts of Black Panther.
Right.
So.
Well, like if we're talking about like choreography, you know, a lot of the action I felt, you know, that's one of the weak, you know, the few weak pieces to me about Infinity War is that, you know, like it starts kind of like it's some interesting action, you know, where like the weird, you know, space man, you know, who's uh who basically, you know, Ebony Maw, the guy who's like, oh, children of Thanos, blah blah blorp, who like uses like he's all telekinesis, and that's like a
Right.
cool fight because it's like
Right.
it's different. It's different from just the punchy punch 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 that we would
Right.
come to expect from a lot of this stuff, or the shooty shoot stuff. You know,
I'm on the fence though about the level of action and violence, because on the one hand I see what you mean. I was thinking like, man, there's a lot of action, but I wasn't upset. I really was like in the middle about it. It was like, this is a lot. Like, I don't know if they necessarily need this much, but I also like didn't feel like it was too much. I was thinking like, I could see it's kind of good to keep it with action, but I don't know if the action totally took away. I actually really liked I liked the Thanos fighting. That was really
yes,
interesting.
that
You
stuff
saw
was
all
all
these
good.
different, and that was really, and even though in the beginning, you know, and I thought that was really good for them to do in the beginning.
With the
You know,
Hulk.
how he was able to overpower the Hulk. Obviously,
Right.
that sort of shows how powerful he is.
Right. Right.
Even later on, when he was sort of overpowered at later times, it was still, I think, kind of believable. I think they did it still in a good way, because in some sense, just like Final Fantasy VI, they were getting experience and learning and working together. And and then but still, you know, like he still seems super powerful. And though I was just thinking, Sam, it's a great point you were talking about that the dad thing, the boyfriend's the girlfriend's dad thing, because that's perfect, because Quill is, I mean, it's not really Quill's fault, but he did screw that up, you know. Where like, you know, they had him. Obviously, it's not ultimately Quill's fault, but it was funny because that little sort of like internal. Obviously, Thanos is the main villain, but they're like internal, you know, specific rivalry sort of speaks to that. I feel like.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an interesting point on that too. But you know, I like a lot of like for me the action that didn't work as well or wasn't as effective was basically the stuff at Wakanda itself. Yeah, mainly because you know there were like specific moments, but a lot of that was like, well, you know, what's going on? Like, are they winning? Are they losing? I have no idea what's going on here. You know, and that
Are you
was,
talking about Black Panther? Or are you talking about Infinity War?
That actually was an issue for me in Black Panther too. But
Yeah.
But I'm specifically.
You just have a problem with Wakanda fight scenes, Jeremy. Come on, get with the program.
Well, the truth is, I had a problem with this in Age of Ultron, as well, and also Avengers.
Oh,
So
the fight scenes in Age of Ultron are terrible.
Yeah, we have a lot of
Age of
criticisms
Ultron
of that.
is certainly worse in that regard, but it's the same kind of feel. Well, the real problem in Age of Ultron is that it was like there was no push and pull. And Black Panther, it was just like when they had the two groups fighting each other, I was like, I don't really know what's happening here. You know, when it was just Killmonger and Black Panther fighting, it's like, oh, okay, you can follow that. But the same thing here, where it's like, I don't know what's going on. It's just a giant battle. And in fairness, that's very hard to deal with. I don't know if there was a way to do it, you know.
Right.
Well, I kind of liked it when they were fighting.
I think some of that was like a deliberate choice. Like I think they wanted the fighting to be a little chaotic. You know, they didn't want you to be able to follow in a straightforward way, like, you know, this is what's happening, this army is here and that army is there, you know, because like you were supposed to feel a little lost, you know, like in the fight and just like all the crazy stuff happening.
And I think that sort of speaks to you. Sorry to cut you off, but like I think that sort of speaks to you because I think part of it. One thing I was thinking of, like, overall with the Avengers, like, where they're at right now is, like, I think part of the thing you could say they have to learn, I mean, you could say there are deeper lessons they have to learn, but they're scattered throughout the whole movie. They're not together. They're not, and it sort of makes sense, you know, that have, like, Nick Fury, you know, at the end, like, you know, because he's leader, because he's missing the whole time. And, like, so, like, kind of the whole thing is that they've sort of, like, disbanded, you know, Civil War happened, and then there's this, so there's all sort of scattered, so they can't really work together. And they try to work together, but they can't. So I feel like at least the next Infinity War will be more of them, getting back together and like working together. So I feel like that's part of it. They were all sort of like scattered. So when they were fighting in the Phantom Forest, or whatever, the Wakanda Forest.
Right.
You like my little reference there?
Is that a reference to something, Benj?
Oh, I don't know. And they're about to get on the Phantom train and fight those weird ghosts that are on a train for whatever reason. Um, uh, but when when they're fighting Thanos, it's people one at a time. I think it's a good point. It is sort of scattered, and like you're like this person comes up, and that's also what I'm saying with sort of like the playing with genre expectations, because they keep making you think this is the moment. Here's when the hero comes in. Nope. Here's not where the hero comes in.
Yeah.
Here's not when the hero comes in. And and it was just I kind of like that.
All right. Well,
whole
here's
thing.
let me ask this question. The scene where all the women are fighting each other, sexist or the opposite of sexist?
I forgot which
There was a whole scene where
Oh, that's right.
where basically it's a Scarlet Witch coming in to save Okoye and Black Widow, who are fighting Proxima Midnight, the only evil lady.
Yes. So, okay. I feel really bad in saying this because I really like Black Widow, and she didn't get much to do in this movie.
That's true. Yeah.
But she did get to fight and be awesome, which I appreciated. That they were like, even though, because she doesn't have any superpowers,
No.
but they were like, she doesn't have any superpowers, but we don't care. Like, she's awesome anyway, and she's gonna fight these like badass aliens. So that was cool. However, that particular scene, sexist. That goes back to like the old trope of like, men fight men, and like there's always like
Right.
the token woman on the good guys team and the token woman on the bad guys team, and they always face off against each other. The two women face off because like a man can't fight a woman. Like, that's just wrong. So like,
Yeah.
so the women always pair off.
Yeah,
We will
but
say
it
this:
is, yeah.
probably, most likely, if Joss Whedon had directed this or written this, he would not have had it that way.
Yeah,
Maybe.
so I think that's fair to say.
But in fairness, there's no right way to do it, because let's be honest, there is a different feeling about seeing like guys hit women. It's just there's just something there. Now, I think it's a little bit different in a superhero movie, but not everyone can be Wonder Woman. So it makes it a little
Yeah.
trickier.
I mean, yeah. I'm not sure the decisions that went into. I mean, I'm remembering it now that you said it, and I did for a second think like. I mean, I noticed that.
The real problem is there just aren't that enough female characters. And that leads to
I think Scarlet Witch did step up pretty well in this movie. I mean, you really she had a character and a character arc.
Yeah, I would say
and
that's true.
And I also think they could have also. This is what I mean also by Russo brothers being really good at like editing and stuff like that. I think their love story could. There probably are people who thought it was too mushy or too much, but I think they did a good job at like still keeping it emotional without overpowering us with like they're just like their undying love for each other. You know what I mean?
Well, no, since you're saying that, let's pivot into something else I want to bring up, which is one of the overall themes of the movie. And I think that one of the big themes here is something that's mentioned a lot, which is the individual versus the group. What is the worth of an individual versus saving the group? Is a very much of the perspective of the individual does not matter, and when it comes to saving the group, he's like the ultimate version of that. And we see several times people willing to sacrifice,
Right.
all sorts of things, sacrificing Infinity Stone after Infinity Stone for people, for individuals. And it's over and over again. And the only times
to the point that it got a little like heavy-handed. I thought.
But the only times we see this subverted, it failed. Once when Quill tries to kill Gamora,
right,
it doesn't work. When Gamora tries to kill herself, it doesn't work.
Right.
Even when Scarlet Witch tries to kill Vision, time is reversed. And
Yes.
I feel like this is all. It's not. But none of these things are told to us. It's told to us through the movie. It's like the movie is saying like, think about this. Yes, Thanos is saying his belief, but but look at how we see when you try to do these prioritizations. of not caring about individuals, it leads
Uh-huh.
to problems. So Thanos is wrong. The movie is kind of, but only like showing that,
Yeah.
under the surface, because yeah, people say like Thanos, you're crazy, but Thanos like, oh, am I though? Am I crazy?
Yeah, and Josh Brolin was just great at that. You like the fact that he had like these little like moments, like, and I think this speaks to his acting in a lot of ways. Like he could have just been like, he's this big powerful guy, and then also he's like, and I believe in something, something like that. But he would do these things of like when people would point out like the fallacies in what he was saying and like the horrible belief that he had. It was even almost like he relented for a second, but it was like he was reminding himself, and he sort of smiled like sadly, like like he felt pity for people. It was more of like, yes, I understand, and I've felt that way for a long time, but this is really the only way,
Yeah.
and like so the sort of sad smiles. It was great, his acting. But go on, Jeremy.
Yeah, so I think that, I feel like that's a big part of it. And, it's always interesting to see how people react to this thing. People are like, was Thanos right? And, the answer
Well, I think
is,
that's part of the genius of it, or I don't want to say genius, but one of the theme really was it was a pretty like resonant theme. I think because it's a tricky question. This whole thing of like, I'm sorry I cut you off, but like but I was thinking this whole thing of like I was thinking because I don't know what totally the answer is, because like kind of both ways it was like yeah, this thing of like sacrificing people, like, is that the reality? Is it inevitable that you're gonna have to sacrifice people? Is it inevitable you have to do that to win? And then you're right, when they even tried to do it, it didn't work. So they have to figure out like another method. That's what I felt like. I was like, oh, the normal processing system of trying to think of these things is off. It's either we save people or we have to sacrifice. I mean, in some sense, it wasn't exactly like that, but I felt like one of the messages with Rogue One is that you have to be willing to. It's not about sacrificing other people, but it's kind of like you have to be willing to sacrifice, yourself, work together and then sacrifice yourself to ultimately win. I felt like that was kind of, for the greater good. I feel like that was the Rogue One thing, and this was like sort of the opposite. And remember, even Captain America said that thing earlier on. He said like, someone said something about just sacrificing one person. Do we have to do, you might have to do that or something like that. And
yeah,
he said a line like, well, we shouldn't have to.
yeah, you should,
And
that's what Captain America said to
and I'm
Vision.
glad he
Yeah.
said it only once. Because that very easily could have been very heavy-handed. Like, and here's Mr. Upright, America man, saying the moral lesson. But it's obviously something he believes in. The character believes in it, and again, he wasn't heavy-handed. He was just like, he realized it with his beard and all. He was very sincere about it. So.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the one thing that sort of was like a little off was the way that like Doctor Strange comes out and says to Stark, like, I will sacrifice you or Peter Parker in order to save the stone. Like, he directly contradicts that theme.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then when push comes to shove, then he does
Right.
give up the stone
Right.
in order to save Stark, contradicting what he had said earlier, and I wasn't quite sure how to take that.
I feel like there's
You know.
definitely, it's intentional, is how I read it. And like, maybe I'll be proved wrong by the sequel, but I feel like there's definitely a reason for that, and it wasn't just, inconsistency in characterization. I feel like there's something there because of all this, the care that they took with all of this stuff. It feels like,
Yeah.
it wasn't just like a throwaway. There's some things you can forgive, due to storytelling. Like I heard like someone complaining, like, the Wakandans, their military strategy was terrible. It's like, well, this isn't a war movie, so who cares?
It's a
And
war movie, and also remember the thing that they're dealing with is the fact that this is actually like is an apocalyptic event.
yeah,
So it was something also Wakanda was not. I mean, they actually showed that Wakanda is not equipped to deal with that.
right. They're
Like-
not a military. They're a bunch of
Because remember,
very
that's even what
good warriors
that's
individually.
Well, no, I think their military could have handled something like that. But remember, the whole thing with T'Challa was like saying was because he was trying to make the priority of like, oh, we can't lose the Infinity Stone. That's what he did, but they're not used to. I feel like if they were all just coming, they possibly could have defended themselves, in terms of like an entire army coming in and trying to fight them. It was just Thanos with the Infinity Stone. I think they very possibly could have, but the whole thing is I feel like the whole Thanos thing like blindsided everyone. That was kind of the thing. He just blindsides everyone,
Yeah.
with so many
Yeah,
ways. So.
it's basically like he does it. It's like he does it in a day. And it's like, man, this was one
Was it
eventful
really a
day.
day?
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Was it really a day?
Yeah, I think so, or at least close to it. Maybe 2 days, but it was pretty close to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought also what was cool about, because obviously Thanos does sacrifice something, obviously that's closest. I mean that was pretty obvious, to get something, and obviously you could see how it's wrong. And I was still affected by that, even though it was clear he was, even as Gamora was rambling off, oh, you don't love anyone, you love. I was like, yeah, he's gonna throw her off the cliff.
Yeah, well,
but,
sure.
but the thing is like I think they did a good job of like oh wow, like I actually did not expect that Thanos had any emotional attachment to Gamora. I mean, obviously his relationship is twisted, but still, like I thought the way they set up at the beginning is that was more like it's his like favorite, like it's his favorite warrior or something like that, like like it's someone who's his like favorite servant who does his bidding, or something along those lines. But I didn't know that he had this sort of like emotional, like had this like paternal like feeling towards her. And I think I was pretty impressed with how they did that and how they showed that like emotional depth to Thanos. I did not expect that, actually. Like I really didn't expect that they were going to make him into like a character, where you sort of saw, you say, more human emotions. I mean, so obviously, like Heath Ledger's Joker is one of the greatest villains ever, but it was a different sort of thing. And I'm not necessarily saying like Thanos is a better villain, but you didn't get with the Joker the whole thing of like, oh man, I feel like it wasn't the same thing. You weren't like seeing him from his emotional perspective. You're just like, this is just a brilliant character and a brilliant villain who's terrifying. But Thanos, it was like, oh, this is an individual with like feelings and thoughts and perspectives, and he's just awful.
Okay.
So,
All right. Well, let's start to wrap things up. And I guess my final question will be for you guys: like, where does this now rank in your Marvel movie list? You got like a week to think about it. Percolate. Talk it over, think it about it, yell, argue. Roll your eyes at people who don't understand things. But so
can we each do our top five now? Can we do our rankings of top five? I think that would be fun.
MCU, yes.
Yeah, MCU.
All right, Sam. Do you think you?
No. Honestly, I was gonna say comic book movies. Total. Stop.
Let's keep it. Let's
do
limit it
MCU.
to MCU.
Yeah, we can. One when you like it, we'll have a follow up later about comic book and movies in
Okay.
general.
So nothing in the X-Men realm.
Right. Nothing in X-Men or anything like that. So you should be able to figure out like where does this go for you here. So I feel like we have like you can think of like, okay, so you have all the Iron Mans, Iron Man 1, 2, 3, Hulk, Spider-Man, Homecoming, the three Thor movies. You have Black Panther and Ant-Man and the three Avengers movies and the three Captain America movies, the two Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and Doctor Strange and Ant-Man. I believe that's it. So that should be your list to choose from. So my question: do you think you guys have it figured out?
I know which movies are in my top five.
All
I don't
right.
know if I have the exact order, but at least I have a top
Okay.
five.
All right, Sam. Let's hear it.
Okay. So my top five, and I can't quite put these in like an ordinal ranking, so I'm just gonna give them chronologically. Avengers 1, Winter Soldier, Guardians 1, Guardians 2, and Black Panther.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So again, that's not like
It's not a rank.
a ranking, but that's the top five. I would put Infinity War just outside of those, basically somewhere around number 6.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So that's my ranking.
Well, I think it's good that you're saying, not having a ranking, because it's hard for me to say, because there's some that are kind of tied for me. So it's kind of like, I feel like it's tied at the top for like my favorite Marvel movies are Guardians of the Galaxy 1, and Black Panther. I do think Infinity War is in my top 5. I was really happy with a lot of it. First Avengers, and either thing is I haven't finished Thor Ragnarok, but I feel like once I finished it, I I saw enough of it that I liked it. So, what the hell? I'll make it in the
Don't
top
get me wrong,
5.
I love Thor Ragnarok, and it's a great movie. It just doesn't quite break into my top 5.
Well, like
Jeremy's probably pretty angry that I didn't put Guardians of the Galaxy 2 in there. But
well, we all have our own
sorry.
opinions. All right. So, well, my list goes like this: it's Guardians 2, then Guardians, then Winter Soldier, then Infinity War, then Black Panther.
Respectable.
So,
Not a bad ranking. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, then Civil War, and then Avengers, and then Thor Ragnarok. It's sort of like, so it's like they're all close, but I feel like that's where I fall in that stuff. And I know that like some people don't get these things in the same way. I feel like I may change my mind, depending on the sequel, but at this point I feel pretty okay with that. All right, guys.
Well,
Any last words?
Well, what I was gonna say is like maybe just a quick second, just saying what we think's gonna happen in the future, what we think about it with this whole Captain Marvel thing. Like, I think it's cool that I don't know when Ant-Man and Wasp, but that's come out when they what time period they're going to be putting it in terms of where the timeline is
Right.
for.
Yeah, I was wondering that. Like, does this take place between these two movies, or does it take place before this movie, or like how does it fit into the timeline? Ant-Man wasn't in this movie.
That's right.
And they had a '90s song for the trailer, so
yeah,
maybe.
but it doesn't take in the '90s.
So, but at least I'll say with the Captain Marvel thing, like, also this is I think pretty brilliant in terms of like marketing stuff with the MCU. The fact that we have to wait a year for Captain Marvel that's going to be taking place in the '90s, which is going to be just a couple months, I think, before the second Infinity War.
Right.
So like that is a great way. That's what I'm saying. It's kind of brilliant, like to keep people like glued in, like Captain Marvel, not yet, and then we're gonna see Captain Marvel can do that, maybe whatever Captain Marvel can do, and then we'll be right back into Infinity War.
Yeah.
So.
All right. It's just gonna be hard to resist the temptation not to watch any trailers for Infinity War Part 2.
Right.
Or
Agreed.
whatever they call it. All right, Sam. Any final notes?
Final notes. More Black Widow.
Agreed.
More Black Widow. Black Widow was probably like one of the most underutilized characters in this movie. So yeah, I want to see more of her.
All right. Okay, guys. That was fun. And until next time, Nerd